Asmodeus, what do you call a group of happy lions? That's right. That's gay pride. Oh, how about pride going before the fall, and it's June. Happy Pride!
Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make certain to hit the like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell for updates on videos like this and many others. Happy Pride Month, ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, and those who remain undecided. It is the 1st of June. Not July. It is the 1st of June, in case you were wondering. What is Pride? Well, we are inundated with images of men and women in fantastic, over-the-top costumes with feathers and sequins and skimpy underwear, and that is fabulous, and I love it. It is, however, not what Pride began as. That was really more as the symbol of, here we are, folks, here we are. So, there has always been GSM people as long as there have been people on this planet. Now, I use the term GSM because GSM stands for Gender and Sexual Minorities. We have been called all kinds of names. We now go LGBTQIAA+. I believe there's something like 25 letters. That's a lot to remember. A lot, even for someone of that community. But as I said, we have been around as long as there are people on this planet. And if you look way back in time, way back to when mankind was crawling out of the swamp, we were just forming a structure of society. We were just learning how to be human. And many of these hunter-gatherers were typically male, though there were sometimes female hunter-gatherers. But they would go out and they would hunt and they would gather. But then what would happen if you left the female, the child bearers, at home? Well, there were warring tribes, and there were also, of course, predators like the saber-toothed tiger and the wolf and many other predators that were, of course, prevalent in that time period. So they decided early on that they would leave the effeminate men behind as protectors of the female folk, which worked fabulously. They would come home, everything would be sort of in order. Now, it's been a long road even from there. It's been a long fight because religion came around. And religion said, oh, I don't understand this. That's not normal. So maybe God told me that it was wrong. In fact, if you have read the Torah or the Bible, there is a verse that says, man shall not lie with mankind like he lieth with a woman. That is, for those who are interested, Leviticus 18:22. Now, from my perspective, I find it to be quite silly because a man cannot genetically lie with a woman the way that he could lie with a man. Trans community excluded in that, but the point still stands. You cannot actually do the same things. However, in ancient Rome, they began to accept it. They began to welcome it. In fact, the Spartans would go out and fight, and men and men would be together because that was, you wanted to show your support, you wanted to relieve your stress, but you wanted it to be connected as a community. Now, you would think that a place like New York City would be so fabulous and welcoming and allowing of everything, and it kind of is now. It really was in the 80s, but it definitely was not in the 1960s. The 1960s New York was a different world, where there were places where ladies could dance, for certain. For the gentlemen, there were all kinds of illicit activities that were available. But of all of these things that could be available, the one thing that was not available was dressing in clothing that appeared to be of the opposite gender. So if you were a drag queen or if you were someone who was a little bit flamboyant, you were definitely on the lookout. You had to be careful because the police could definitely arrest you for that. Now today I'm actually wearing a vintage Hugo Boss suit. Now it's not as old, but it is reminiscent of the turn of the century 1900s. This is probably 1990s, but it is pink. Pink is a color associated with feminine, with femininity, with women, with girls, but it's still a man suit. Would I have been arrested? Maybe, maybe not for that. This brooch pin that I'm wearing is from the turn of the century. This cameo is originally designed as a lady's brooch. Would I be arrested for that? Maybe, maybe not. The makeup? They might have a little bit more problem with that. So here we are, the 1960s. There's so much that's going on in the 1960s. There were the civil rights movements, and then of course there was Vietnam, and there was all kinds of anxiety and unrest. So the Mattachine Society in the late 50s and the early 60s formed. And the Mattachine Society, at first, they decided, okay, well, we're not allowed to go into bars and be open about our sexuality, but we want to make certain that we don't frighten them. We want to make certain that we don't scare the normal people. So they had this rule that men would wear suits and women would wear dresses and makeup, and you would have your hair done, and you would just declare, I'm different, but we're the same, we're really the same, we're really the same. Well, that didn't work. So they decided in 1966 to have a sip-in, and they would go into these bars and they would say, by the way, I am who I am, are you going to take my money or not? So many people would go into these bars, and then the bars would refuse, and then because of the civil rights movement, they would say, okay, now I'm suing you. And they actually won. It was one of the major things that the Mattachine Society did. One of the benefits that still, to this day, we can look back and say that was remarkable. But it didn't really change a whole lot. It really didn't change anything, really, because it was still illegal. You could not dance with the same gender. You could not hold hands with the same gender. You could not wear something that was seen as the opposite of the gender that you were assigned at birth. And there were places that were raided. So even though they could serve alcohol, they would refuse to give an alcoholic license to these bars if they would cater to the GSM community, because even the gathering of homosexuals was considered lewd and indecent. Well, the Mafia, being as smart as they were, as clever as they are, they went, just like they did in the Prohibition, this is a way to make money. I don't actually care about you, but it's a way to make money. Money, 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 money. So, the Mafia, there was one major crime family in New York at the time, and they owned bars and restaurants and clubs and nightclubs and all kinds of things. And they got around a lot of their illegal activity by paying crooked cops. Well, these people of the GSM community really needed a place to gather. They needed a place to let off steam. They needed a place to exist, to just simply exist. Hence we come to the Stonewall Inn. It was originally designed as a private club for heterosexuals to gather. Well, the Mafia bought it, they cheaply renovated it, they made it over into the Stonewall Inn as a gay bar, but they got around it because they didn't need the liquor license, because you would bring your own liquor, supposedly. And in order to maintain their private club status, you had to sign or register at the beginning. Now they welcomed everybody. The homeless youth would panhandle, and they just enough to get the entry fee to go in. And they could dance, and they could buy drinks that were watered down, and it wasn't, the toilets didn't work and there was no water behind the bar, but it was still a place that they could gather. And it wasn't just the homeless youth, it was also wealthy patrons who were oftentimes blackmailed by the Mafia in order to keep their identity a secret. But it was still a home. People could gather there. Drag queens, transgender people would come in and they would feel welcome, where they were sort of shunned in other bars. Because again, in the 1960s in New York, it was illegal to wear clothing of the opposite sex, or even perceived clothing of the opposite sex. So if you were a Scotsman wearing a kilt, you might run into a little trouble even then. So, what happened was the cops would oftentimes they would tip off the Mafia. They would say, hey, psst, by the way, we're going to do a raid in a couple of days. Make certain that you have normal people. Make certain that you don't have any alcohol. Usually it was fine. In fact, Stonewall was raided just a couple of days prior to the 25th of June. Well, this time the tip-off didn't occur. And the cops marched in and they raided the place. They were saying that they were selling illegal alcohol, and technically they were because they didn't have a liquor license. But that wasn't why they were there. But they had female cops who would take people into the facilities next to the overflowing toilets, and they would actually check and see if your genitalia matched your clothing. I mean, I've heard of carpet matching the drapes, but that's ridiculous. So, they would check, and if your clothing did not match your gender, into the van you would go. Into the van you would go. Well, people started to gather around this inn. They started to gather, and they were like, what's going on here? Who is this? What's happening? Well, the cops made a very key mistake. They arrested a lesbian woman, and they abused her, and they beat her, and she called out to the people gathering, do something! Help me, do something! Well, that encouraged them to pick up bottles and cobblestones and whatever, pennies even, whatever they could find, and they began to throw them at the cops. But that still didn't stop the harassment. In fact, they go inside, and there is a transgender woman, a beautiful, strong, powerful woman of color, Marsha P. Johnson. And she went, I am tired of this. I am tired of being treated like a second-class citizen for numerous reasons, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And she picked up a brick and she threw it at these cops. Well, you know, one thing led to another. Even the Mafia got involved in this. Now the Mafia is going, oh, crap. Okay, we're involved. We don't want to be associated with this. They set the place on fire. The fire brigade comes in. They put the fire out. The cops are still arresting people. And in the 1960s, they did not have the communication that we do today. So they would run from apartment to apartment all around this village, the Greenwich Village in New York. They would run around, hey, it's starting, hey, fight for us. And it wasn't just members of the LGBTQ GSM community. It was everybody saying, I don't care what you dress like. I don't care what you do. I don't care. You don't affect me. And they marched against the police. And the first Pride was literally a riot. Now, do I condone destruction of property? No. However, sometimes I understand where peaceful protest doesn't always work. So I will say I am proud of that fact. 1970, the next year following 1969 and the Stonewall riots, marked the first official gay pride parade in New York. And that was where people were able to be fabulous for the first time in their lives. They could, if you wanted to wear a pink polka dotted tie or a dress or heels or men's trousers and a biker jacket, more power to you, power to the people. And they did. And so every year annually, it became a celebration of life, a celebration of everything fabulous. In fact, in 2016, former President Barack Obama instituted the Stonewall Inn as a national monument because it helped spark the current GSM movement and pride. And now, my beautiful viewers, a word from my friend the devil, Asmodeus, and featuring the mother of all witches, Hecate.
Oh, I love Happy Lions. Are you friends of Dorothy?
There's no place like Homo. There's no place like Homo. There's no place like Homo. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, and thank you at home. And make certain to check out our Patreon, where my friend the devil will talk about being a friend of Dorothy. We have so much more in store for you. Thank you so much, my beauties. I appreciate you as always. And if you would like to support the channel, there are links in the bio. Till next time, as always, I've been your host, Richard-Lael Lillard, the Gentleman Psychic.
Like I surely